Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the 8th episode of Season 10 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Before we get into last week's social media, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the new Dirty Knobs album, Vagabonds, Virgins, and Misfits. It's another step forward for Mike's songwriting and the band's evolution. I think that Reckless Abandon was Mike sort of testing the waters to see if he had enough material to put a full-time band together. Then off the back of that reception and the strength of External Combustion, that subsequent tour, he knew that those muscles were still working well, and this was absolutely the thing he should be doing. It absolutely amazes me that Mike still has the passion to keep pushing himself and a seemingly endless well of riffs and licks to draw from. And 5 years ago, if you'd asked me who my favourite guitarists were, there's no way his name would have come up. But now, he's rock solidly in my top 5 alongside the likes of Eddie Van Halen, Brian May, Mark Knopfler, and Stevie Ray Vaughan, maybe would probably round that out. My signed copy of the new album is on its way to me as we speak, and I can't wait to spin that one up on vinyl. For me, that's always a much more engaging way to listen to music. Last week's song was the rip-roaring Honeybee, and I wanted to give a huge thanks to all the people who said really nice things about my daughter's appearance on the show. She was tickled pink that there was some positive feedback about her thoughts on the song. And over on Instagram, @CouplesRob commented, "Amazing interview with your daughter. She gives me hope this younger generation can carry on Tom's legacy. Extraordinary insights for a high school student. My boys are 8 and 12. I'm hoping they too can help keep his music alive going forward." And then in brackets, "I've been doing my best to brainwash them." And thankfully, I don't think I've ever had to brainwash Emma. She's always had a really good appreciation for music, and though she listens to plenty of stuff that maybe doesn't interest me, there's very little of it that I think is truly dreadful. In fact, we had a long road trip this last weekend, and amongst the stuff we tend to default to, like Tom Petty and Clutch and Cake, she played an album for me called The Family Jewels by Marina and the Diamonds, which I really enjoyed. So I'd recommend giving that one a listen sometime. Marina has a very distinctive, unique voice, and the songs are, fairly eclectic and with some real high points like, well, the ones I enjoyed, Mowgli's Road, Hermit the Frog, and Girls are all very good songs. On Facebook, producer extraordinaire Paul Roberts posted, "Great pod as usual, Kev." Thanks, Paul. Love how each interview explores a different facet of Tom's music or the reviewed song. And that's been a really unexpected and wonderful part of having these chats as part of this season for me. My guests always bring not just different insights into the individual songs, but completely unique ways of framing their thoughts too. I wish I had the time and resources to be able to schedule and record conversations about every song in the catalogue with other people, but you know what? Until I win the lottery, I'll just keep plugging away as I have been. Tribute band Even the Losers commented that it's one of their absolute favourites to play live, and man, who wouldn't want to rock Honeybee at maximum volume at every chance you get? I was talking on the episode about nonsense lyrics and Dylan's propensity for absurdity on the 3 albums he released after going electric. And Jack McNay responded, "You mentioned Dylan and the word yellow. My favourite Wilbury song, Inside Out, is a big example of his usage of that word." Now, I'm not sure if I've explicitly stated this on the pod yet, but I'll definitely be covering the Wilburys albums once I'm through the main catalogue. And I'm not sure yet whether I'll dive straight into Mudcrutch and then the Wilburys, or cover off all the B-sides and outtakes first. But I know that when I get to Volume 1 and Volume 3, the word fun is going to come up a lot. Look up your chimney, the sky ain't blue, it's kind of yellow. Great line. Nora Haywood Olson says, "Full disclosure here, it took me a long time, brackets 30 years give or take, to come around to Honeybee. A harder rocker than You Wreck Me, at first it seemed really out of place on an otherwise more acoustic-sounding album. Now I can definitely see why it has its place, being a moment of musical levity and fun in an otherwise pretty serious string of songs. I've grown to love not only the playfulness of it, but the gritty feel to it as well." And this is a perfectly good point. Tom was, mindful of our experience as an audience. On the last DJ, he gave us respite with The Man Who Loves Women, Mojo Has Its Candy, and even Echo parts the clouds with Free Girl Now. So he was always mindful to balance out the sour with just a little bit of sweet. Jill Lucas commented that was nice having Emma on to chat. To be honest, I've never really warmed to Honeybee, and interestingly, Emma used the word that I never wanted to say, sleazy. Not a fan of the lyrics because I'm never sure what is meant by some of them, but also because the footage I've seen of him on that TV show, well, his image was not my favourite either on there. His hair is all slicked back, and, well, I'll just stop there. Sorry, Tom, love you, really. And that was, Nora, that really made me laugh when I read it. I think he looks cool as hell on that Saturday Night Live performance. But then, you know what? I'm not looking at Tom through any sort of lens of attraction. Let's say that. Jamie Dunst replied, I love this song. It's just a fun rock song with such a good beat. I loved your conversation with your daughter, and Alice Cooper became a playable character on the Iron Maiden game. So that's when we were talking about the Iron Maiden game that Emma and I both have. It was Legacy of the Beast. So it's a mobile phone-based game in the Iron Maiden universe, but neither of us have unlocked Alice yet. Finishing up social media on Twitter, the wonderful Steve Ursel left this lovely note. Excellent song, an enjoyably sleazy little rocker with a sense of fun, much needed after the despair of only a broken heart. Great contribution from Emma. I don't know how much podcasting experience she has, but if not very much, then she's a total natural. Well, that was her first time ever discussing music formally, and I thought she absolutely nailed it personally. And so I had a very proud papa moment when Steve enjoyed her contributions. He went on to say, I thought your suggestion to ask her to listen to and talk about some songs she hasn't heard was a good one. Her passion for Tom's music and music in general really came across. And I mentioned this to her, so on a future season, she's definitely going to come back on as a Petty 8 guest, which will be a lot of fun for me at least. So thanks again for those lovely positive comments and for allowing me the self-indulgence of inviting one of my kids onto the pod. So after last week's levity, we're heading over to the opposite end of the thematic spectrum today with the stark, stunning acoustic plea, Don't Fade on Me. Well, today's episode is probably going to be slightly different to anything we've done so far for a fairly specific reason. Ordinarily, I get to talk about the interplay between drums, bass, different guitar parts, piano, organ, percussion, and then vocals, including harmonies, etc. But this week sees me talking about a song that was recorded with just Mike and Tom playing acoustic guitars. And that intimacy and scarcity of instrumentation compels me to critique this one slightly differently, and means that I probably won't spend most of my time talking about all the different musical elements. Of course, those moments within a song are still there, they're just a little more subtle, and I'll get to talk about the guitars I expect, but I suspect that probably the majority of what I have to say about this song is going to be more concerned with the way I connect to it emotionally and the tone and tenor of this extraordinary performance. So let's start with what the people in the room had to say about this song, because I think it provides good context. Producer Rick Rubin states that this was the hardest song on the album to record. In the liner notes for Wildflowers and all the rest, he says, we played it so often on so many days. There were moments that it felt like nobody would ever hear it. And when instrumentation is stripped back to only two guitars and the rhythmic tone of a song requires, complete precision and a very specific feel, it can often be difficult to capture that. And if you're in the perfectionist mode that everyone was in during the making of this album, you can see why it would have taken a long time to get this one right. Rubin highlights this, saying, the nature of the guitar parts, wanting them to catch the right notes and bounce just right with Tom and Mike playing together, we all loved the vibe of it, so the struggle was worth it. Mike Campbell further confirms the effort that went into getting the song just right, saying, I remember it was a hard one. It's in drop D tuning where it's finger-picking and modal sounding. I put the chords together and gave it to Tom on a rough demo, and he wrote the words. We kept trying to record it, but it took us a long time just to get the right lilt to the rhythm, because the words were so important. And in conversations with Tom Petty, author Paul Zolo describes Don't Fade on Me as having a really pretty, somewhat spectral melody, a description I love, to which Tom talks about Mike showing him the tuning and the chords, saying, he showed me how to do that on the guitar one night during the sessions, and I thought, oh God, I love that sound. And he said, it's really simple, you do it like this. And I went home and wrote the song. And I love that spark of creativity can come from so many places. In this case, it was the chord progression in the chorus that informed the entire rest of the song, which, when you think about it, does make sense. The song does feel like a rumination on that central theme expressed in the chorus, but we'll get to that in a little while. On the length of time it took to get the song to where everyone was happy with it, Tom says, we practiced that quite a bit. We would play it from time to time, took a lot of passes at it. It was one of those things where we would try every day at the end of the session. So by the time we got it, we had practiced it quite a bit. And maybe this is the key to the whole thing. If the two of them sat down at the end of a session, every night and just played, they would have lots and lots of time to find exactly the right pushes, pulls, and counterpoints that worked and blended so perfectly together. Engineer Jim Scott talks about the incredibly intimate way the recording was finally captured, saying, Tom and Mike sat across from each other with two acoustic guitars just 2 feet away. We put up these big fancy microphones and bit compressors, We wanted it to be real intimate, almost like a late 60s or 70s recording where people were really taking chances and you could hear every breath and lip smack. So before we dig in, we know that this was arguably the biggest labor of love on the album. In her commentary on the song, journalist Jan Uhelski comments that it took over 100 takes to get it right. And even though Rick Rubin remembers Mike becoming frustrated that they couldn't get it exactly right, I get the sense that it wasn't a song that they ever considered abandoning. When you listen to the demo version of the song, you can hear immediately that this is a piece of writing with incredible sonic substance and weight, even though the lyrics were completely rewritten, other than, well, for the most part, other than the title line. I do want to run through the guitar parts in this song, but rather than walk through each section as I usually do, I'll take a different angle at it. First of all, there are so many exceptional little pieces of playing in this song, and it's captured almost supernaturally well. I think it might actually be my favorite recording of an acoustic guitar in all of recorded music. I know that's a strong claim, but as I was thinking about this and writing this, the only other two songs that come close for me are Little Martha by the Allman Brothers and Eddie Van Halen's Lullaby for His Son Wolfgang 316. The guitars on both of those songs are incredibly clean, present, and precise in the same way that this song is. So I suspect that just as much painstaking iteration and experimentation went on with the microphone selection, placement, mixing, as happened with the performance itself. If this weren't recorded so intimately and immaculately, it would lose its emotional center. Every movement of the fingers is captured to a degree that you can see the brass coils on those top strings in your mind's eye every time that open D note is played. And the drop D tuning is also what gives this song its specific feel. Because that top E string is tuned a full step lower to D, it's slightly looser and obviously deeper to give it a darkness and a richness that it wouldn't have in a standard tuning. So for example, if you think about the song Going to California by Led Zeppelin, that's in the same key, but in a standard tuning. So that bass D note doesn't have that same weight to it as it does in this song. It's one of those quirks of drop tunings that you can't replicate otherwise. Drop D is also the reason that Black Sabbath sounded so much heavier and so much more menacing than their contemporaries, but the tuning has its roots in the English Renaissance period, and that tradition, which grew through classical music and into folk, is where the roots of this song find their nutrients. The other thing to say about this guitar part is that it transcends the ordinary, at least in part through the fabulous use of dynamics. If you listen to how often a single note is plucked much harder or more strongly than another, or certain phrases are played at higher volume than others, you really get this sense of restlessness and foreboding that you'd lose if the song were all pitched at the same level. In fact, when you listen to the alternate take that was included on the American Treasure compilation, you can hear what I'm suggesting there. While that version draws back the curtain on the evolution of this song, it also highlights why this specific performance was worth chasing. When you listen to the home recording, you can feel that the idea of the song is there, but the nuance of the performance definitely isn't. It's one of the very few demos where you know Tom would have come in and said, right, this is what I'm thinking, but not exactly like this. And I used the term restless just now, and I think this is what the demo shows, where the alternate version shows why the cadence and the dynamics become so important in the final performance. You could strum the chords in this song and sing it, and it would work, and it would be enjoyable, but that specific picking pattern is complicated by the use of two guitars, meaning that it's essentially impossible to play completely faithfully on one instrument. What I love about this approach to recording this song is that it really isolates the guitar to such a degree that you have to marvel at how well it's played. You also have this brilliant trade-off between the guitar and the vocal taking the melodic lead. That descending lick never sits over top of Tom's vocal, and the vocal never competes with the guitars for any of the frequency range. The hook of the song is that three-note F, C, D melody in the chorus that's played an octave apart on the two guitars, with the words "so don't" and "fade" separating the three times it's repeated before we get that fabulous descending lick that starts on the third beat of the bar and lands on the one of the next. There isn't any big transition piece between chorus and verse as the guitars swell back down to that quick picking groove. Another thing to comment on, as I'd mentioned earlier, is how incredibly good Tom's vocal is on this song. When you don't have drums, bass, keyboard, and layers of guitar to prop you up, you really need to nail your vocal take. And this is before the days of auto-tune. Well, it's not quite before the days of auto-tune, but it certainly wasn't as quick and easy as it is now to tune someone's vocals. And it would be an absolute nightmare to try and tune a performance like this anyway, because Tom is scooping into his notes at times, either up or down, sometimes singing them very cleanly in that falsetto, and at other times letting the notes just fall off a cliff. Like the second time he sings, "Don't fade." You get this incredibly sinister downward fade, pun 100% intended. And on that line, if you did tune it, it would sound awful. And I'm not overly precious about vocal tuning, I'll say that. I think it can have its place here and there, but a great singer simply doesn't need it, and Tom Petty absolutely didn't and wouldn't have used it, especially on this song. His voice is haunted and vulnerable, with those odd flashes of darkness seeping through. The lead into the solo hears Tom say very quietly, "Don't do it." And the solo itself is a thing of absolute beauty. I think it's probably up there again in my top 10, maybe top 5 Mike solos. I love it when Mike cuts loose, of course we all do, but I always love it more when he's incredibly precise without losing any heart and when he puts so much emotional drive behind what he's playing. The superb vibrato he puts on certain notes in this solo, and the way he builds those arpeggiated triplets in the middle, and the way he ends slightly behind the beat, they're all things that combine to make a really, really tortured sounding sort of solo. It just fits the song so, so well. Again, we always say that about Mike, obviously, but this one is one of the best examples of it, I would say. When I think about this solo, it has a gravity to it that makes it feel centuries old. You could almost imagine that it's been living underground in some secret grotto since time began, just waiting for the right song to come along and feed it. It feels like a primal life force all its own, as if Mike is possessed by it rather than being its architect and its master. And I know that this isn't the case, and the reality is that Mike Campbell just has such complete mastery over his instrument and over the musical form that he can write and play something this good and just make it sound effortless and timeless. Sensational really is the only word that works to describe this solo, in my opinion. Okay, folks, it's time for some petty trivia again. Your question from last week was this. Apart from the vocals added to Hard Promises by Stevie and Laurie Nix and Sharon Solani, the album also features additional contributions by Bugs Wydell and Phil Jones, but who played bass on track 2 from the album, A Woman in Love? Is it A, Ron Blair, B, Duck Dunn, C, Mike Campbell, or D, Howie Epstein? Well, Howie wouldn't join the band until long after dark, and Ron Blair played bass on every song except A Woman in Love, while Mike Campbell wouldn't add bass to Heartbreakers' album until Rebels from Southern Accents, meaning the answer is B, Duck Dunn. A Woman in Love is the third Heartbreakers song that Duck played on, so your question for this week is this. Which song, chronologically, is the first in the Heartbreakers catalogue to feature a guest musician? Is it A, Hometown Blues, B, Breakdown, C, Magnolia, or D, You Tell Me? Okay, back to the song. I'd mentioned how exceptionally close and intimate the vocal performance is in this song, and if you want a clear example of this, just listen in that last verse when Tom sings, "Never could quite touch." You can hear Tom's mouth forming that Q and the very hard sound of it phonetically as if he was sitting just 2 feet from you. And there's such an ethereal quality to the lyric, but not a ghostly one. Again, I'll use the word haunted here, but in a very immediate horror movie type of way, not a folktale or a campfire ghost story type of way. The ghost in this story is 6 inches from your face and whispering right into your ear. You can feel its breath on your neck, and you could almost touch it if you could only see it. And before we get into the lyrics, I want to talk quickly about the structure of this song because it shares a similarity with Crawling Back to You in the way you get a bonus verse that you might not necessarily expect. After the solo, we don't get a chorus to fade or a repetition of a previous verse, so we have verse, chorus, solo, verse, chorus. So if you're using that ABC notation for verse, chorus, bridge, it's actually A, B, A, B, A, B, B. There isn't a musical bridge section as the solo's played over the verse progression, and that's not always typical. In a lot of songs in this catalogue, and most of rock and roll for that matter, once we come out of the solo, we're heading back into the chorus or the outro. So to have another verse before the ending with the chorus repeated, it's that nice little change up. And again, Tom was always again mindful about changing structure and not doing the same thing over and over and over again, especially on one album. Right, let's get into the lyrics. I'm going to throw an idea at you that is likely entirely in my head and almost certainly entirely not what Tom intended. But I've said before, and it's a hill I'm happy to suffer on, that one of the things I love most about Tom's music, and great music in general, is its ability to connect with different people in different ways and to stir up different images in your imagination. So I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Fallen, starring Denzel Washington and John Goodman, But the basic premise is that a demon has existed for millennia, who has but the basic premise is that a demon who has existed for millennia, or a malevolent spirit, whatever it is, floats around looking to inhabit various human forms and playing havoc with their lives. That immaterial sense of something floating above humanity and observing it, occasionally interacting with it, is what this song puts me in mind of. And I don't think that the entity in this song that I imagine is a particularly malevolent one. I also don't know if it's an actively benevolent one. It's almost like a supernatural observer that feels a sense of extreme melancholy. And if you're still with me to this point, I think you can interpret the lyrics as being this supernatural cosmic force observing humanity with a profound sadness. I remember you so clearly, the first one through the door. I returned to find you drifting too far from the shore. So our species was young in the galaxy when this entity found us. Maybe a little like the caretaker in Star Trek Voyager. What do you mean you don't watch Star Trek? Go watch Star Trek Voyager.
Mr. Paris, set a course for home.
Aye, Captain.
We were the first intelligence to evolve, perhaps the first one through the door, and after millennia that could pass in the blink of an infinite eye, we're now drifting. I remember feeling this way. You can lose it without knowing. You wake up and you don't notice which way the wind is blowing. So in my narrative, this is our overseer having that sense of dread that perhaps they've neglected our care and supervision, and they haven't noticed that we're heading off the rails. Then we get the chorus line, but don't fade, no, don't fade on me. Maybe we're the only life this non-corporeal entity has found in its travels, and maybe it's actually afraid that we're going to go away and leave it alone in its infinity. You're the one who made things different. You were the one who took me in. You're the one thing I could count on. Above all, you were my friend. So again, this could be projecting on the part of our narrator. We aren't even aware of its presence, but watching our development, it feels like part of our tribe. So the line, don't fade on me, becomes tinged with that desperation because the connection it feels is so strong, but it's unidirectional. We don't give it anything back. There's no feedback there. And maybe it knows this and it's happy to live in its own fantasy, but it's still kind of sad about it. Well, your clothes hang on a wire and the sun is overhead, but today you are too weary to even leave your bed. Our entity is now faced with the fact that our species is dying, that the one thing they could count on is in fact fading. Was it love that took you under, or did you know too much? Was it something you could picture but never could quite touch? Is our species' quest for knowledge, coupled with our lack of ability to control our passions, is that our eventual demise? Is our unseen friend left ruining the fact that peace and longevity were aspirations that we could never fully realize as a species? And coming out of that last verse into Don't Fade, the vocal delivery, it sort of borders on almost panicked. And if you buy into my narrative, this is the life force howling into the void before the final resignation on that last line and the off-time ending of the guitar. So I know I've painted a rather odd picture here. And like I say, I know it's a real stretch and it's a flight of fantasy, and maybe I've been reading too much Patrick Rothfuss lately, but I love that mental image of this eternal being finding our little corner of the galaxy and almost feeling a parental instinct to watch over us while being powerless to actually intervene. It's why Don't in Don't Fade on Me feels so much more like a plea than a directive. When you look at the original lyrics that Tom has on the demo he recorded, it's more of a story piece concerning the bass player in a band who loves a young girl who lives down on Garden Road. And it's a good lyric and an enjoyable narrative, but by reworking the words completely and making them darker and more abstract, I think Tom better matches the tone of the music. And I'm glad that this is one song that he, Mike, and Rick stuck with to make as strong as possible. Today's guest conversation sees the return of the always entertaining Tommy Edwin. We chatted about the music he's released since he was last on the show, as well as, of course, Wildflowers and this week's song. Once I'm editing, I may break out part of our conversation to release as a standalone bonus episode. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy my chat with the marvelous and hugely talented Tommy Edwin. Tommy's back to talk about a song from Wildflowers. But before we dig into Don't Fade on Me, just general thoughts on Wildflowers as an album. Do you remember it? I don't think you were listening to Petty really when this album came out, were you? Or were you?
It's amazing. Like we talked before, and thanks for having me on the show, Kevin. First off,
You bet.
I enjoyed the last one so much, and it's a great thrill to be on here. Back in my professor days, and in the '80s, I completely missed out on Tom Petty.
Yeah.
You know, I was not listening to radio. Um, he was out there, but somehow I was not as aware of him as I should through the early days, when they're doing American Girl and,
Yeah.
Damn the Torpedoes and all that kind of stuff. And there's a similar story about how I missed out on a lot of Dylan stuff. I was a very focused scientist for about 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
and so I missed a lot of music. And so, like I said, I started listening to this group called the Jayhawks, started getting me back into music. And it was the thing of almost like, wow, people are doing this kind of music again. This is
Yeah.
pretty cool. It's not 80s new wave where you're standing up in a sparkly coat with waxed hair and it was like, wow, this is really good stuff. And even I could maybe play some of this. And so I guess I started listening to Petty. I might have got the Greatest Hits album, and Wildflowers was 94,
Yeah.
And I can't overemphasize how much that blew me away, that album.
Yeah.
And for the songwriting, for the performances. And there's also something maybe about Rick Rubin being involved. Yes, Rick, I'd love to have you as my producer. Give me a call. The other thing was that I don't know if you're aware, maybe we discussed this before, but that album won an award for engineering,
Yeah.
Grammy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was something about the sound on that album. I don't know how to describe it, but it it wasn't it doesn't never sound like it was recorded in a studio with so much reverb and all that stuff that it makes it distant. It was close enough where the bass and the drums feel like they're right next to you,
Yeah.
and the guitars are clear. Everything is there's nothing muddy in there. Everything is clear. I can sit down with Wildflowers and I can pick out things that I can't with other albums,
Yeah.
if that makes sense to you. And it's just a masterpiece. Some of it was because maybe the simplicity, they didn't try to throw in too much. And there was just so much coming across from him about his personal pain,
Yeah.
that you just I if people don't think this is one of the top 10 albums of all time in rock and roll, then I don't know what to tell you, man.
Yeah.
Because it absolutely is.
And we talked about eclecticism, last time we talked, and this album, the thing that blows my mind, I think maybe most about this album is it really is eclectic. And the song that we're going to be
Yes,
talking about
yes,
today sounds like, I mean, the style of that song is nothing like anything else on the album, and yet it still fits seamlessly. The
yes,
whole
yes.
sounds like a whole. It doesn't sound like 15
Yeah,
individual parts. It's incredible that they did that.
yeah. It's that the whole album hangs together that way. And when people say, "Well, how much do you like Wildflowers?" I may have told this story before, but I have a friend in Sioux Falls who's in bands. He's a really good pianist and arranger, the Haig brothers, Jeremy Haig. And one time I'm at one of those shows and he does Wildflowers on the keyboard and everything.
Okay.
And I got to talk to him and everything. And I made a joke like, well, maybe I could sit in with you sometime and do a Tom Petty song, maybe. He says, yeah, but you'd want to do the whole album Wildflowers. And I was like, hey, now there's an idea, you
Front to
know.
back.
And I'm looking at it. I'm looking through I'm gonna go through the song list right now, if I can find it here. I've got the little book from the CD.
Yeah.
Okay, songs I know how to play. Wildflowers, I play that all the time. You Don't Know How It Feels, I do that all the time. Time to Move On, I do that. You Wreck Me, I do that. It's Good to Be King, I do that. Honey Bee, I do that. Don't Fade on Me, I haven't played live yet, but I can do it. Hard on Me, I've learned that one. I could do that too. I don't do Cabin Down Below, uh, but none of the music on here is so difficult that an ordinary rock and roll band can't learn it. That's the other
Yeah.
magic thing about this. There might be bits of Campbell's solos that are hard to pull off, but
Yeah.
mostly very doable. To Find a Friend, I do that one. I have a great time with that, To Find a Friend in the Middle of His Life.
It's
That's his
such a good
wife.
song.
I'm
Such a
like,
good song.
boy, he wrote this just about me. That one, in the middle of his life, left his wife, ran off to be bed. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much true. House in the Woods, I haven't done that one too. I've got actually Crawling Back to You on the looper as a back thing in it, and
Yeah,
that took me a while because he does it in kind of a different key.
yeah.
Whenever I run into Tom doing something in B flat or E flat, get the capo out, because he wasn't about to play anything in E flat unless it was in a
Oh, no.
capo.
God, no. Why would you?
Yeah, yeah. And I've worked out wake up time on the piano because I can do little block chords on the piano,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping to get a piano instructor to help me, learn how to do a line with left hand and right hand and that kind of thing, so I can
Well, and
do that.
the thing about wake up time though is as a pianist, and I play keyboards as well, but because the way I don't know if you know the way this came about. So he had the original arrangement was on guitar and
Right.
came in and he said just wasn't quite the feel of it wasn't
Yep.
quite right. There's something wasn't bouncing
Yeah.
the right way, or whatever. And Rick Rubin said, "Well, why don't you try playing it on piano?" So Tom sat
Yeah.
down and played it on piano, and they said, "Okay, well now we'll get Benmont to come in." And Rick was like, I think actually the way you played it, that works because Benmont's going
Yeah.
to play it perfectly, and you didn't
Yeah.
play it. You know what I mean? But the
Yeah,
sort of
yeah. Yeah.
the stylistic difference between the way Tom and Benmont play piano is kind of why that
Absolutely.
song works in a way, you know?
Yeah. Well, that would be the case with me because I can work, when I'm playing, my right hand can work out inversions on piano, so the chord changes are easier.
Yeah,
I'm not jumping up and down. I've learned how to do that with inversions and things. It's just a matter of and I need to spend an hour or two every day at the piano to get my left hand independent and picking out bass lines. But
yeah,
I think I can do it with some work. But yeah, that so because I'm thinking someday maybe I'll drag along a keyboard. If I get good enough to play piano, I could do something like that. And but that album, we're both fanboys of this album to the
yeah.
nth degree. And there's so many things, and yeah, it's like the last thing recorded on audio tape or something
I think
that was done analog?
one of the last one I think in that studio, I think one of the few because it was, yeah, like
Yeah,
94, so it's just when well, I suppose Pro Tools have been around for a little bit, but I mean, again,
yeah,
though, I don't think you're gonna get well, one thing I'd talked to a couple of other people about this is you don't get this album if Jeff Lynne produces it. Just because of the way Jeff Lynne produced, it would have still been a good set of
yeah,
songs, but it wouldn't have been the same album,
we
right?
probably don't wanna get into that.
But I also think it wouldn't be quite the same if it wasn't on tape because
Yeah,
there's a difference from recording to tape. There's a difference in just the immediacy of we've got to get this take right. We've got to be able to play properly because
yeah.
we can't fix it in post, really. But then
Uh,
also there's the warmth of the tape that you get from the audio coming back.
I think on my system at home, I can tell the difference between, vinyl and, CD
Yeah,
at times.
yeah,
But I also, I understand Dylan a lot better as I've tried to do some recording, and there's something about this, back in the days, and I think there was a black blues singer, talking about this one day, old jazz singer, I can't remember who it was, not Sarah Vaughan, somebody was saying like, it's now you go in and you don't really have to do things today, because it's just you and you can do the take. And if you don't like it, do another take.
yeah,
And there was something about that live thing where you got 20 musicians in a studio and you got to get it done and get right and I feel that way. We can certainly make a really good record. Sounds great. Would have some players come in and do things or whatever, but a totally synthetic song, where you had some guy just pick out, strings, synthesizer, and
yeah,
fake drums and everything. It's not quite the same thing as listening to, maybe the Stones doing Jumpin' Jack Flash,
yeah,
with that
yeah,
kind of that energy thing. So, and I'm not complaining about things because I've had fun doing the 3 or 4 songs where we added stuff to it and everything like that. But it's not quite the same feel, and you understand that that's what Dylan was having issues with all those years was producers trying to get him in the studio and overdub and, do all that kind of stuff, and he wanted to go in and just sing and play and
yeah.
get it done and move on. I kind of like that. I want to go and just do the recording, get it done, and it's a snapshot of what I was doing at the time, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna do what I want with a song live. I'm gonna maybe add stuff, change lyrics. I already changed lyrics here and there on a couple of my songs, so their
Yeah.
lyrics are a little better. So that's just the organic thing of being a musician, and because to me, it's the playing and the process and the recording. Yeah, maybe that's the end result. You want it flawless, right? The producers want it flawless with no errors and and I'm like, sometimes I'm listening for that little thing he did on the guitar that,
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah. Yeah.
supposed to be there. That little tick he did,
Yeah,
so
and you talk about that sort of idea of a band coming in and actually playing and being able to play and being well rehearsed and all that kind of stuff. I think
yeah,
that, for a lot of the songs on Honeybee and To Find a Friend and Hard on Me or Cabin Down Below, you need the band to all be on form. But let's talk about Don't Fade on Me because that is two guitars, one voice.
yep,
There's nowhere to hide, right? If
yeah,
you're off
no,
and you
there's
cannot play
nowhere.
your
No,
instrument, there's nowhere
yep,
to hide there. You're exposed.
yep. Well, that's a great song. I'm when I was young lad, and Buffalo Springfield came out, and this guy Steven Stills. You talk about influences on me as guitar player. We maybe didn't talk about that fully, but there is nothing that's a bigger influence on me than Steven Stills and acoustic guitar.
Right.
Just the sounds he was getting. You can tell just from the vibrato when you're listening to Stills on
Right.
acoustic guitars. You know what I mean?
I
You can
see.
hear one note. You can hear one note. Oh, that's Stills.
Well, a guitar's vibrato is the same as a singer's voice in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I said, you can tell within 3 seconds that it's Stevie Ray Vaughan,
Like I
just
said, if
because.
you listen to my guitar playing, you'll hear the kind of way I slide in on
Yeah,
things and do little bends and stuff. Oh, that's Tommy playing. I think it's the same kind of thing, but still
yeah,
the huge one. And in that whole Buffalo Springfield thing, there was this whole thing they did, and other people at the same time, folkies or whatnot, going back to that open D. Sometimes it's Dad Gad, sometimes it's the D modal.
yeah,
But you've got that drop D, and which lends itself to, playing anything that's gonna be D, F, and C in there, and you can do a lot of stuff.
yeah.
And, I remember, listening to, like, Bluebirds by Stills and going like, I was just it kills me, the acoustic guitar in there
Yeah.
that he plays, and I said, like, "Nobody could ever play that, man." And then I discovered double drop D, and I found out how all these guys from Springfield had been playing stuff, and Crosby and all these guys. Well, no wonder I can't play that music.
That's
I've got
cheating.
to Yeah, yeah, they're cheating. They got this open tuning thing they're doing. My God, So all of a sudden I can play, what's the Joni Mitchell song?
Well,
Um,
talk about tunings, talk about weird tunings, Joni
oh,
Mitchell,
yeah.
holy I mean, she invented most of them.
Yeah, like or the Dylan on the Blood on the Tracks, It's,
Mhm.
I was reading about Blood on the Tracks. I got one of the extended things, and they're like, yeah, they got bland, and they realized they'd done them all in open D tuning, the whole album. So that
Yeah.
was an issue. So yeah, so you learn all that, and there's all this funky bluesy kind of stuff you can do with a drop D, and you hit the F and all that. So and that this song is very much in that tradition. It's a drop D, so the E's drop down a step, and Tom's just playing. He's playing a D chord, and then an A minor, and he walks down from a G and an F during the verse.
Yeah.
And then when I was trying to learn this song, it was stumping me. And I didn't spend a lot. I wasn't necessarily trying to necessarily learn the whole thing at the certain time, but then I saw a Mike Campbell podcast or a little video, and Mike has these great little videos where he'll take you through some of the songs they
Yeah.
played. That's like, oh man, it's like my very own lesson from Mike Campbell. And so I'm gonna get my guitar out here. You probably can't hear it, but if you're trying to learn this song in the verse, what he's done is on the first and the fifth, on the second and the sixth strings, he's got this harmonized two-note chord he's playing. Bop,
Right.
bop, bop. And that uh, and that was the final key for me learning that song. I hadn't thought of going up the neck like that.
Right.
And that's a bit of genius in that song for that, because he goes to a B flat and then an F, then a G on the bass string, and so that makes that chorus work well,
Yeah.
and so that's a bit of Tom Petty or Mike Campbell genius there.
Well, that's
I was
Mike.
thought,
So Mike
yeah,
wrote
yeah, that's Mike.
the origin of the song is that Mike wrote that chorus progression, exactly that you're talking about, showed it to Tom, who was like, "Dude, I love that." Took it
Yeah.
home and basically wrote the song, right? Wrote the verses and came back in, and then
Oh
they
yeah,
played it
okay.
with very
That's
different
how it worked out.
lyrics, but it's a Mike Campbell jag because, like I said, I mean that's where
Mike might have said something and I'd forgot it. Yeah.
yeah, but that's
So
where people when we talk about and we should sort of explain to people who are not musicians when we talk about voicings and inversions and these kinds of things, we're talking about just playing the same chord in a different position on the neck, and
yes.
it just sounds totally different. You know,
Yeah.
you can play a D minor in 50 different positions on the guitar,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
it's going to sound different in all 50. So if you're playing the chords, well, I know that's the chord, but it doesn't sound the same. Try changing positions because quite often that'll probably give you a hint as to what they're actually doing.
Yeah, you could, if you were playing that song, you could play it and just hit a D and a B flat and F or whatever, or an F, you on the chorus, you could play a B flat and a F and a G, and you would have, you're playing the chords, but it's totally different when he plays it that way. He's keeping it down in that Delta blues kind of thing or
Yeah.
whatever, by doing it that way. And it was just so the experience for me that I'm trying to get across is that listening to the song, go like, how the heck do you do that? Then Mike having this thing where I can see, oh, it's that simple. Oh, boom, now it's done, and he has other little riffy things he does in there that are, you know, uh, that little kind of riffy thing you would do on a any open D song.
Right.
But yeah, and it's a great song, and I have to say, for some reason at one point I thought this was about Howie Epstein. But
Okay.
Howie's alive when they're recording this and is on the album, so it wasn't about him. It's about somebody else. So I
I,
had to disabuse myself of that notion.
I suspect, with a song like this, that the melody informs the lyric, because which it sometimes does, right? You just play a song a
Yeah.
certain way because the original lyrics are, like I said, they're miles different to this. If you listen to the Wildflowers and
Oh,
all the rest
really?
version, completely
Oh,
different. I mean, not even close, right?
okay.
But apart from the "Don't Fade on Me" part, but when Phil Collins wrote "Something in the Air," or "In the Air Tonight," sorry, everyone assumed that, oh, this must be about a personal experience. He was like, oh no, it was sort of this idea, this image in my head.
Yeah.
I bet you that's what this one is. I bet you it's one of those things where he's
Yeah.
just got to, it's that sort of vague outline, and I'm not going to color it in too much. I'm just going to leave it there, and that's good enough because I think the mystery and mystique of the song, that's again, it's one of the signature parts of why this song is so good, because you don't really ever actually know what this song's about. There's just a lot of different
Yeah.
ephemeral
You
ideas
know,
kicking around it.
a lot of times it's just coming out of your head. I've got a song called "Adored" that's about, I don't know if I told you about it. It's the one that got me banned from a festival because, it showed I wasn't family friendly. And that's another story. But it's about a girl who's a kind of a junkie and a guy, and he loves her despite all this. And
Yeah.
when my brother heard the song, being my brother, he had to call me up and say, "Is this song true? Did you write this based on your experience?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, yeah, in my head."
Yeah.
I said, "No, it never happened."
Yeah.
He said, because he's like, "When were you ever in LA that long?" And I was like, "Well,
I wasn't.
in my head, I'm in LA all the time in the early 70s,
Yeah.
who wouldn't be, right?"
But that's what
And,
songwriters do, right? You conjure things. There's the
yeah,
wonderful line in Shawshank Redemption when Andy talks about, this guy they've invented. He said, I just conjured him. He's a phantom. He doesn't
yeah,
exist. And that's what the
yeah, yeah,
songwriters can do that.
yeah,
And I think it's that
absolutely.
listening to that opportunity when it comes along, right? The thing about this lyric though, to me, is that don't fade. No, don't fade on me. It could be someone who's slipping away because they're dying. It could just be someone who's slipping away because two people are growing apart. It could be there's so many. It could be a kid leaving. It could be a kid leaving home and their light's not there anymore. There's
Yeah,
so many different
you can
ways that you
apply
can
it to
interpret
so
this.
much.
Yeah.
But I think I was fixed in my mind so much that it was like about Howie, that
Hmm.
especially the two first words are like, here's this guy I know who was with us, but he started drifting off because of drugs or whatever, and we
Yeah.
lost him. And I bet Tom could go back to that song after they lost Howie and say, wow, I didn't think I was going to write this song about him.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I
I
think
bet if
that's
you had a conversation with him, he'd say, yeah, man,
well, I
that
mean,
kind
how
of
he
thing.
wasn't well during. I mean, he wasn't sort of, he was definitely sort of that
Yeah.
slide had begun into the serious addiction around this time. Like he was already
So,
not doing well. So
so if that's the case, I wasn't aware that that had started that early. Then maybe, it's ostensibly it could be, he's
he's
thinking
seen his
about that.
friend. He's seen his
Yeah,
friend
yeah,
starting to
yeah.
drift. Yeah.
So, and he's telling him, "Don't fade on me,"
Yeah.
don't come back. So, yeah, so yeah, but it's a great song. I think it's a great song in the music. Got a great melody.
Yeah.
It's got innovative guitar playing because
Oh.
I don't know anybody in drop D who's ever gone up there and done that in the verse. It's like
Yeah.
I'm gonna do West Montgomery in this drop D song, really,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it just is, it's so haunting, about
Yeah.
what's going on there.
Well,
And yeah, I think I'm gonna do this next time around. I didn't think I could do the voice in the past,
right.
but Tommy's voice has, I have to say the one thing over the past couple of years, when I started out, maybe I wasn't singing, singing.
Right.
And now I'm just opening up the pipes and letting them roar.
Yeah.
And if can I brag on myself a little bit?
Of course you can. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm at this gig at this wonderful place called Pelican Cove on a lake in Minnesota. They had me there a couple times last year, and they couldn't wait to get me back. And they booked me 5 times this summer. So I've basically got a residency there.
Nice.
Great little place on the lake. It's like Okoboji in Iowa. And the manager she and I get along great well. It's a great little place to play. They got a nice little corner on this lovely patio. And so I'm wailing away this Saturday, just letting it rip out, and every now and then I'm surprised myself by how my voice is doing, just because a lot of singers, especially I want to say newer Americana, especially guys, they don't really sing. They kind of carry a melody, but they don't push it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100% know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the word I get, the guy one of the guys from the kitchen, they assigned to help me do the loadout, and the little guy named Joe, he said, "Man, we love listening to you, man. You sing like you really sing."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said, "Well, that's great to hear that." And I don't know how we got onto that, but
Well, no, that's fine because
anyway,
the vocal in this song though is, and that's something that I didn't appreciate until I really started doing this podcast. So certainly once I hit Wildflowers, when did my deep dive into Petty a few years ago, is how good a singer this guy is.
he
You
is. He's
don't,
absolutely.
massively criminally underrated as a singer because
Yep.
he can use his voice like so many different instruments. Jamming Me is a different thing. Refugee is a different thing. Don't Come Around Here No More is a different thing. He's doing a different thing again here. He doesn't sing like this on any other songs really because he's kind of he's not pinching his vocal, but he's really pulling it back. And yet, like you said,
Yeah.
he's still projecting with
Yeah.
enough
And
emotion that you buy it.
the point I was making was that in doing the transitions from lower to higher, sometimes at Tom I have to go to a different key.
Yeah.
Like Mary Jane's Last Dance used to be I had to do it in D minor instead of A minor.
Okay.
Now I can do that. I can also do Good to Be King now in the original key instead of the others because my range has improved. And this one was one I might not have tackled because it goes up a little high in the chorus, but I think I can handle it okay.
Yeah.
And dropping the to a half step is always available if you need to on a song. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because
Yeah.
every band I run into now, I go up on the stage to play harmonica with or whatever, and like they'll come over and say, we're half a step down,
Yeah.
for the singer. And I look and I open up my harmonica case and I say, well, I have 12 harmonicas, so
Yeah.
you're not going to kick me off the stage because of that, So
Yeah. Well,
anyway, yeah. So this is one I think I'll add because the guitar part's just you can't do the solo, but I'll find some way to do that solo.
let's
Something
talk.
approximate the solo.
Let's talk about that then, because that to me is where this song, again, I mean, the whole song I think is fabulous. It's one of my favorite Petty deep cuts that, if people are talking, well, give me something I might not expect from Tom Petty. This is one of the first songs I give them. But the solo in this song, it just kind of highlights for me again that Mike Campbell is probably one of the best guitar part writers of all time.
Oh,
No,
and that's why he's on my top 10 guitarists,
yeah,
because he, he writes parts the way Steve Howe writes parts. You know what I mean?
yeah,
He's playing for Steve really plays for the song, and
yeah,
so does Mike. And the thing that intimidates me on learning the solo on here, I haven't gone out and found tutorials or anything yet to try to do it, but when you get into this, he plays it gutsy little, little bends and stuff. And then he does this rolling triplet thing in there, and I'm
yes.
like, how did he do that,
I
man?
know,
You
I
know?
know.
So yeah,
And the precision though too, right? I mean, like I said, it's a real trick to get feeling and precision at the same time. Because a lot of the
yeah,
shredders, those metal shredder guys, they're technical and they're really, really good, but I don't get the same emotion. Like I said, I always go back to like Stevie Ray Vaughan and guys like that who just they wrung every drop of emotion out of every note. And Mike
yeah,
Campbell's the
yeah.
same kind of guy, but he's got both elements of it.
And there is this thing about, you can play a lot of notes. You can play fewer notes, but you can make those notes count if you put them in the right place and
Yeah,
they have the right inflection and everything. So, you know, Mike might just be playing, pentatonic lines over something, but he finds all the things that, split the grain and
yeah,
and do that. It's not like I watch the shredders on YouTube or whatever, and they're finding as many notes as they can, bluegrass
yeah.
players too. And I'm like, yeah, but have you listened to Mike Campbell, just hit that one note in the right spot.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that's all you need.
And
So
he does it again and again and
yeah,
again
yeah.
and
And
again,
he
right?
writes such great parts,
Yeah,
and for lead and also, some of the finger style stuff and the picking. Yeah. And I've never have had a chance to go see Mike with the Dirty Knobs or any of that yet. I'd
yeah,
love to see him with the Dirty Knobs. I should have tried to get to a Fleetwood Mac show and see him, how he played those parts. So
yeah,
yeah, but absolutely one of my favorite guitarists,
absolutely.
him and he and Gary Loris and the Jayhawks, just I like Gary Loris as a songwriter too, but when I first started listening to him, he was doing some of his country licks, and then I never seen anybody controlled feedback the way Gary Loris could do.
Right.
It's almost like he's got a separate amp for feedback, and he hits a switch, and it just and controls it like, and it was like, what's a Jayhawk song without the screaming feedback as you come down? Yeah, yeah. So guys like that make it on my favorite, guitar assist.
Yeah, it's that I was having a conversation in a different sort of fan community the other day about favorite drummers. And I was going to guys like Jim Keltner and Steve Ferroni, oh good, he's got his name, Vinnie Colaiuta, all these guys who are not they're not John Bonham and they're not Keith Moon, and they're the guys who you can
Yeah,
also put Mike Campbell in a place and say, we need a part for this song, and he'll get it right every time. No matter who, whether it's
speaking
Tom
of
Petty and the
that,
Heartbreakers or anyone else, right?
you can't imagine. I can't imagine. I don't know if anybody else besides Steve was on Wildflowers, but I can't imagine a different drummer on there.
Ringo
You
plays
know?
on one track, I think he plays. He plays
Yeah,
that
yeah.
shuffle on To Find a
That's
Friend, I think it is, he plays. But other than that, it's all Steve, right?
yeah, and it's just his tone and his approach to drums,
Yeah.
you know, not to knock the previous drummer, but yeah, I know they had troubles. They had problems with him. I don't know what the problem was, but Steve
It
is
was ego, is what it came down to, really, at the end of the day, I think, more or
the
less.
well, when you read some of the histories, it was always like they were always having troubles with how they wanted to record the drums because the drummer wasn't doing it the way they wanted, that kind of thing. If I get that story right, and I don't know the story, I haven't read the bios or anything on Tom the way I should.
Yeah.
But all I have to say is the punch on the drums and Wildflowers is just knocks me out.
I
Just
think it's my favorite drum sound of any album of all time. Honestly,
I
I do.
I I couldn't disagree with you. It's got
Yeah.
just that perfect tone to it on all the elements. One of the
Yeah.
stories I heard was that on a couple of songs, the way they did it was Steve would just do one of the drum parts through a take, then they do another part of the drum part.
I don't think on
They
this album.
separate them.
I don't think on this album. That's more of a Jeff Lynne thing. I don't think they did this on this. I'm
Oh,
95%
okay.
sure
All
they
right.
didn't
Then
on
I
this one.
heard
Yeah.
that wrong. But however he play, I don't know how he does it. But certainly his live playing is exactly like on the Wildflowers album. You know, he's just a fabulous drummer. And I'd love to have a drummer like that,
Yeah.
that behind me. So I like the drummers who don't try to overplay, but they have that perfect little offbeat little fill here that they
Yeah.
can throw in when the time is, and you go like, oh yeah, that's fabulous. You know,
Well, that's where, you know, because guys like Steve and like I said, Vinnie Colaiuta, who played with Zappa, and all these guys, they don't come from a straight rock background. So when they come in, they'll bring in these little weird jazz or bossa nova or calypso type fills that a rock guy's just not going to play, right? So that's where you get, and it's kind of the same with Mike. That it freaks me out because there's no real history of him. He was never in a jazz band growing up. He was never in any of these bands, but
Yep.
he's just one of those guys who has that ear, and he can hear exactly what every single song needs.
Yeah. A lot of my opinion of drummers was informed by two events. When I was in Taiwan, you know, I was trying to learn to play drums and I could maybe keep time and throw
Yeah.
in an on beat fill and things like we're all trying to be Ginger Baker or whatever, you know. I maybe passed muster as a timekeeper somewhat, but there was another band there with a drummer who had been around from that region. His name was Tracy Freeman. He was half Asian, half Caucasian, and he and his brother West both played in big bands around there in Taiwan and Okinawa and everything. And so the first time I got to see Tracy play, we went to a dance, and he was playing with a group that had a keyboardist and a guitarist, and these guys just blew our minds from the
Right.
outset because they were playing a repertoire none of us had heard, and they're playing parts. You know, they weren't just slogging through a song. And Tracy was the most musical drummer I'd ever heard up to that point. It was like
Right.
he could do all these fills and things that were offbeat and everything that I couldn't even think of. And so ever since then, my opinion has been like, yeah, I've seen one of the greatest drummers you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And when I was 17. And then another time in a club in Norfolk, I saw a drummer in a hardcover band. He was a better drummer than I've ever seen since.
Oh,
In
wow.
any band.
Yeah.
Don't know what his name was. He was it was cosmic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's I haven't seen enough drummers, but you know, those are the two drummers that set things for me. And I was perfectly happy to exit any hint of a career as a percussionist, you know. Besides the drummer, everybody was all like, the drummer's the dumb guy, you know, he just plays the song, keeps the beat. And I was like, well, I want to write stuff and,
Yeah.
contribute to the song. So that made that. But yeah, I know you get spoiled by a good drummer, man, and then you don't get a good drummer playing behind you. It can be hell.
Knackers everything. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
listen, thanks for jumping on again, man, for
You
talking about
bet.
Wildflowers, talking about Don't Fade on Me. This has been a slice as it always is, and we'll definitely bring you back at some point in the future.
Absolutely. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on. It's always a pleasure, and I have a great time talking with you.
Awesome, man.
We're
Thanks so
out,
much.
man.
We're out.
All right.
That's it. That's a
See
wrap.
ya. That's a wrap. Okay, we're done.
Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. Don't Fade on Me is one of my favorite 3 or 4 tracks from this album. It stands alone in Tom's body of work as a completely unique sounding song with a very singular, dark lyric. It could be a ghost story, it could be a rumination on lost love or death, or any number of things. Heck, it could be about an eternal life force roaming the galaxy, lost and alone, and only hoping to find someone they can feel close to from a tragic distance. However you read this song, I think that it has a splendor and an immediacy to it that is incredibly compelling and engaging. And I know that not every song on this album can be a 10. Well, not for me. And I also recognize that some people will raise their eyebrows at my rating for this one. But for me, this is such an easy 10 out of 10. I've always been drawn to outliers and catalogs, and I've been drawn to this song imaginatively and musically since the very first time I heard it. I hope you love it too, and I hope that you're enjoying the season so far. This is the turning point at which we move into the second half of the season, and we now have fewer songs left than we've already covered. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out on Twitter at DeepDivePodNet. Tons of great stuff there, lots and lots of good shows. You can also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my best friend Randy Woods, who performs all the music you hear in this podcast, including the theme, and the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my other very good pal, the one and only Corey Morissette. This season, we are digging into the first 20 years of Foo Fighters, and we're having a hell of a lot of fun doing it. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Twitter at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable, and please do leave a review or a rating if you haven't already done that. Keep talking to me on social media. I love seeing your comments and your thoughts on these songs, and I'll keep reading out as many of them as I can. And as a reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So if you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms or go to your local independent record seller to grab some physical media. In fact, you can go to the Tom Petty store and get physical media. You know, you could pick up an actual physical copy of the new Tom Petty Country record that's going to be released, I think, at the end of this week as I record. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merchandise for this show, please go to tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook, if you're not already a member. And also check out Tom Petty Radio, which is channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about the 9th track on Wildflowers, the heartbreakingly sad Hard on Me. Bye-bye.